Welcome to the Software Security Gurus webcast. I'm your host, Matias Madou, CTO and co-founder of Secure Code Warrior. This webcast is co-sponsored by Secure Code Warrior. For more information, see www.softwaresecuritygurus.com. This is the second in a series of interviews with security gurus, and I'm super pleased to have with me today Dr. Chenxi Wang. Welcome, Chenxi.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, Chenxi, do you mind saying a few words about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Chenxi Wang. I am a security investor these days. I run a cyber-focused venture fund called Rain Capital, and we've been doing investment in cybersecurity early stage companies since 2018. I'm also sitting on the technical advisory board for Secure Code Warrior, which is another role I have in addition to a few other board responsibilities. Super pleased to be here today.
Fantastic. Chenxi, I'll try to pronounce your name correctly this time.
Chenxi. So if you replace X with S, you have it.
Okay. Chenxi. So for today, I actually have three topics in mind, if you don't mind. So I hope they are near and dear to your heart. And for the first topic, I would like to take you 20 years back in time, if you don't mind. So
20 years, has it been that long?
Gosh, yes, it has.
Gosh, so, yes, 20 years.
20 years. So I actually have a PhD from Ghent University, and I was working on static analysis and code obfuscation, a field which is very related to what you were doing. And your dissertation was actually titled, let me read it out, A Security Architecture for Survivability Mechanisms, and that was from the University of Virginia. And I remember that control flow flattening was a big thing in there. So when I started, a couple years after you, and I was doing my research, the name Chenxi Wang was some sort of a mythical character for me, a god in the field. I knew your work, but maybe I was too scared to reach out to you, and you were the untouchable one. So I think an email would have done it to get in touch with you, but I didn't do it. One of your most cited pieces that I looked up today was software tamper resisting, obstructing static analysis of programs. So how sorry do you feel for that paper making it hard for static analysis vendors to do an analysis on their program?
Well, it's, it's been so long since I did that piece of research. And back then the threat models were very different than it is now. So I dealt in today's environment with all the simulators and everything that's going on. This piece of research will have deterred a lot of analysis, code analysis mechanisms, maybe static analysis still, right? So what's interesting is, first of all, I had no idea anybody read my dissertation.
Absolutely. Multiple times.
And so it's really, really nice to know. But one of my advisors in grad school is this gentleman called Bill Wolf.
Okay.
Bill was one of the, I would say, grandfathers of computer science, and he had done some fundamental operating system research in the early days. One of his systems called Hydra, which is pretty much cited in every operating system textbook. Okay. So, and when I was studying with him, and he was actually the president of National Academy of Engineering, and doing a professorship as a part-time. And when we were looking at this problem, right, so he was guiding me on different things, and I was experimenting with different things, but the flattening of the control graph was actually completely my thinking under his guidance, right? We had done a lot of elimination of different mechanisms. So, and what was interesting is several years later, he had given a keynote at a National Academy of Engineering event. And I had not known about this at that time. And later, the keynote was made into a paper, and I read about it, where he actually mentioned my research in a way that he was saying that the approach that we ended up with, flattening of the control graph, was completely not something he had expected. Because the direction we were going were very, very mathematical and very different than what we ended up doing. And he credited that to a different way of thinking that I brought into the discussion, and a different background that I was trained with. And it's related to another topic that we might discuss today is diversity of background, diversity of thinking. But what was really interesting to me was what he said in the keynote was that a different view on the problem that can lead to a completely new approach that a traditional thinking would not allow you to have. So he was a big proponent of getting talents from different fields and different, even students from psychology, from music, all studied with him for computer science, and they all brought really different viewpoints to the table. And this research that I did, which over the years, I got a few pieces of feedback where was, again, really interesting. Like, I think 2 years ago, someone reached out to me on LinkedIn, said, hey, I'm from DoD. I've been doing work in DoD for a long time, and we actually use your control flow flattening methods in some of our code hardening efforts. And that was really, really nice to know, really, really nice to see again. So I'm I guess 20 years later, I'm proud of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Piece of work.
So there are people that are reaching out and that are still using it. And actually, I was wondering how you came to that subject, like, because static analysis, like 20 years ago, it was not about finding SQL injection or cross-site scripting. It was right. Program analysis and doing data flow analysis and control flow analysis, but for different purposes, right? They were doing code optimizations or... So I was wondering how you came to that subject of obfuscation.
I remember. Obfuscate, because the one of the questions we were discussing in the research meetings was, can we run code in a secure and so that ensuring its integrity, execution integrity, in an environment that is not trustworthy, and that was sort of tossed around as a topic that cannot be achieved, and we were like, we can make it harder, and honestly, the research I did made it harder and didn't make it impossible, but that was a question that stuck in my mind after a few research meetings, and then I said, well, maybe we could do something, and let's think about what we can do. And I also remember another conversation I had with Professor Jack Davison. Jack's research, right? Also at UVA, and so we were discussing this, and I was already, talking about various things to deter static analysis, and he had an insight which I would say eventually led to this approach, was that he said, everything we do in programming is sort of deterministic in some ways, right? Even though it's ultimately it's not deterministic. Like he said, in terms of static analysis, a lot of things are deterministic, and he said it would be great if you could inject more dynamic nature or inject non-determinism into the program, so that would make it harder. And that comment, led to this approach, really. Yeah.
No, it was absolutely novel technique, and I think in the 4 years that I was working on that subject, I didn't come across a lot of novel things in that area. I'm not sure why that was. It was actually hard to scramble things around in applications to hide the inner workings. So let's shift gears a little bit then. Let's come back to today, 20 years later. So today you're an investor as well as an advisor, and thank you for being on the technical advisory board for Secure Code Warrior.
Thank you.
Before that, you've spent 6 years doing you were research VP at Forrester. So I think in the last decade, you've seen a lot of pitches from organizations that either wanted to have money or wanted to be noticed by an analyst. Where do you think today there's an opportunity in the software security market? Where do you think we still have some untapped ground for new organizations?
So I think in general, the security market has matured quite a bit in the last 20 years, right? So when I started in this market, really it's about anti-malware and network security, firewalls, and that's it, right? And you buy endpoint antivirus, and you buy, Checkpoint or Cisco firewall, and you're good to go. The threat models have morphed from that considerably, as well as the complexity of our environment. And with those two factors, your protection mechanism has to rise up, I would say, from the infrastructure level to more the data level to more the application level. And more specifically, if you look at network security, right? So more and more end-to-end encryption is being deployed everywhere. So that means network security is just rendered to metadata analysis, right? Pattern analysis, metadata. It's really hard to look into the payload anymore, and going forwards will be even less so. And any security technologist will look at this and say, yeah, we need to push things more into application. We need to push things more into at the data level. And what that means is your security mechanism relying on your applications a lot more, and your protection will have to be at the application level as well. And we all understand that the application level flaws are really what makes a system vulnerable today. And with that realization, I'm seeing the last maybe 2-3 years that there's significant uptake in investment in organizations' investment and attention being spent on application security, protection of applications, and understanding of vulnerabilities at the application level, and remediate it. And so before that, I would say application security a lot of times took a sort of the red-haired stepsister position to network security, but it's no longer the case, right? So, and because of that, we on the the venture investment side, we're also looking at application security a lot more seriously. And another factor that I didn't mention, which is also very, very interesting for application security, is the whole DevOps movement, right? And when you have developers touching your production servers directly and deploying code right from his or her desktop to the server in the cloud, and you have the microservices infrastructure running, you have no luxury to do large, expensive code analysis anymore. You have to do application security differently, which also in itself presents innovation opportunity. And whenever there's innovation, there's investment potential, right?
Do you also see a shift to more proactive with that DevSecOps movement? Do you see a shift to more proactive application security, or is it still reactive where we're trying to find the problem, to find the bug, and then remediate instead of trying to embed and harden what we're putting into production?
So I see a little bit. I would say it's not enough. I do see more people looking at doing application security more proactively, and certainly companies are on the sophisticated end of that is doing really well in terms of embedding application security measures into the entire stages, including the design and code review and development stages. However, it's not yet a mass market practice, I would say. Now, we were just discussing DevOps. I think DevOps really is a driving force for you to do more in the sort of pipeline stage, because if you don't, then if you don't try very hard to embed application security into the the pipelines, the tool chains, then you're left with only possibility is to do penetration testing and reactive security measures, which means you're always a step behind, right? So that's the state of things.
I read a blog post about where you said, hey, you need what are the 8 slides that you need to win over an analyst? So
yes.
DevOps needs to be in there, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was I wrote that post when I left Forrester, and I was thinking of my 6 years there, what I have learned. I've sat through many hundreds, maybe thousands of presentations, and some of them really stay with you, and others you just completely forget.
Yeah.
And the ones you remember are the ones that articulate the problem really well, doesn't sort of spend too much time on why the market needs this, blah blah, but states the problem and states why it is interesting and what we're going to do about it, why our team is uniquely qualified to do this, and then give a sort of the early market response, if you will, right? And all you have to do is hit these 5 points, and you hit them succinctly, you hit them well, and provide good proof points. Then you have a really good presentation in your hands. But a lot of people don't understand that really well. And I've sat through lots of presentations where kind of roll your eyes and saying, when is this going to be over? Get to the next stage, right? So and when I wrote that post, that was, I think, still one of the highly ranked on Google on how to talk to your analysts.
Oh yeah, I can see why. Absolutely.
I think it's really it's a good framework to keep in mind to make presentation not only to analysts but also to customers as well, right?
And also, I think to investors, if you add a couple slides about the market size and how you market and your pricing model and the opportunity, I think it can be used to investors too.
Yeah, I've been asked many times to update that post to be 8 slides to impress your investor. I should.
So. Yes. Last topic I would like to touch on is so you're a big advocate for women in technology and diversity in general. I think you made it very clear what you thought about the RSA booth babes back in the day. Your consulting firm is called the Jane Bond Project, with a clear reference that women can save the world too. And I see that you're a co-chair on the security track of Grace Hopper. So I think it's clear that you're a big advocate in that area. At Secure Code Warrior, we generally try to hire the best person for the job, and ultimately we ended up with a very diverse group of people: race, gender, religion, age. However, when we were talking to cybersecurity investors, we didn't come across a lot of funds like yours where women are in charge. And I'm trying to get my head around that one, and I'm also trying to figure out, is that an advantage for your firm? I guess so, or a disadvantage in certain areas. So how do you look at women leading an investment firm and stacking that up against the traditional firms?
So you're right. In the venture space, I think things are changing, but still the case that it's predominantly male dominated. And so I live in Silicon Valley, right? So if I go to Google and Facebook these days, I walk around and I see a ton of women engineers, even if they are still the minority in the company, but you see them, right? Yep. When you go to a venture firm, a large firm, you have lunch around the table. I've done lots of those, and in many cases, I'm the only woman sitting at the table. Even worse, that there are women that go in and out of the room carrying coffee. So I spent a year actually thinking about what I would do next, and that image always came to my mind. Yeah. And I think I started this firm really not for the purpose of changing the venture industry per se, but I was interested in using my background, my expertise in the investment field, which is still a new field to me at the time, and it was a new challenge, and I was interested in tackling a new challenge. But if you take a step back and thinking about bringing diversity into this world of venture investment, I think there are two things that's of note. One is gender diversity, perhaps, and the other one is background diversity, right? So if you look at many of the investors in the field, they have finance background. But I don't have a finance background. I have a technology background, an operator. So those people with those backgrounds are by far the minority in the investment field. Why? Because this field is still fairly traditional. They want people who have that finance management background. And while there are a lot of good investors with that background, I think the viewpoints you bring can be enriched by someone who really understands the market and with the technology and operating sort of viewpoint, right? And so with those two diverse viewpoints, I think this industry needs to embrace, and I'm hoping that I am bringing something different to the discussion.
Yeah, so it's finding complementary profiles, I would say. But at the same time, when you say, with technology, when I interview for an engineering position and there are 10 candidates, I hope there's one woman in there in that pool. So I think also on the technology front, I think we need to try and make sure there's an inflow of women in that technology space.
Yeah, I think you said that we always try to hire the best person, and a lot of people say that, and in the end, if they don't end up with a diverse workforce, then you look at the flow and you say where within that process things are a little bit different. I would say you always want to hire the best people you can. That's one. Second is you want to try very, very hard to eliminate unconscious bias, because that's it's a very widespread bias, and all of us have it at some level, right? And so if you can do those two things, then you will end up with a diverse, or at least a fairly diverse workforce. And for our fund, we also don't have a mandate to fund women founders, even though I want to proactively find more women founders. But with that in mind, our fund has nearly 50% of companies that have women founders.
Oh, good. I did not know that. I did not know that.
Yeah. So that, I think, is because we try very hard to eliminate unconscious bias in the selection process.
Good. So to finish off the conversation, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you one personal / fun question. So sometimes I see tweets about your very lovely boy. Seems that he cannot do anything wrong. So sometimes I want to trade with my kids with yours. But hey, so if you combine that with gardening and with the Corona lockdown, so I was wondering, are you still doing the gardening yourself? Because I know you like that, or is he taking over that part?
Oh, he is not a gardener. He is not. I would, if I want to pull him away from his Nintendo Switch to go in the garden with me, oh God, that is it's a high order. So I am the gardener of the family, and I enjoy it. And I can tell you this morning and every morning I take my morning coffee in the garden. I look at my vegetables growing. It's a great way of starting my day. So
nice. Fantastic. Chenxi, thank you very, very much for accepting to be the second guru on the software security webcast.
Who's the first one?
Gary. Gary was the first one.
Oh, of course, Gary.
Thank you very much, Chenxi.
Thank you, Matthias. Stay safe and healthy.
Bye.
Bye.